What's up everyone, my name is Ember and we're back again with another yearly wrap-up video. This is going to be the best of anime from 2023. I'm actually going to split this one up into two videos because there are so many anime from this year that I wanted to highlight specifically. As always, all of the clips from these compilations come from my seasonal wrap-up show series, which you can check out the full episodes of on the rest of this channel if you want to see the clips from the shows that didn't quite make the cut that you are seeing scrolling across the screen right now, or if you want to hear me rant and rave about a bunch of really terrible anime that I ended up dropping. At the end of this video, I'm also going to be giving my top 5 episodes of the year, as well as my top 10 OPs and EDs of the year, just as a fun little bonus at the end of the episode. And at the end of the next video, I'm going to give all of my stats, breaking down everything I watched and completed from 2023. So without further ado, let's jump into it.
Alright, that was a lot of fun. I just finished up all of Zom 100 Bucket List of the Dead. Yeah, really damn fun, really damn good looking zombie anime. It's just a shame that the production collapsed like 9 episodes in. Let's talk about that for a little bit. Like, this is a goddamn phenomenal looking show, and oh boy did they pay the price for it. So if you don't remember, this originally aired in the summer season of 2023, but the last 3 episodes ended up getting delayed till, like, I think December, because the production just completely collapsed and they could not put out the last 3 episodes, or at the very least could not put them out at the quality that they were hoping for and or would be expected based on the previous 9 episodes, which, to be fair, the quality's pretty goddamn high. Although there were some warning signs that was probably going to happen. This show did not have a fully formed opening sequence until episode 9. Like, at least half of the OP for, like, episodes 2 through, like, 7 or 6 or something, I think it was like 2 to 7, was recap of the previous episode, which is always a bummer when you don't get, like, a really solid OP. So that was, like, the big warning sign. Like, the OP was not complete, and the bits of the OP that were complete were pretty simple looking. So that was definitely a place where corners were cut. Fortunately, the actual, like, fully formed OP is fucking fantastic. Like, and I mentioned this to Shaw on Twitter when I was watching it. I was like, any OP that has a, like, choreographed dance sequence in it, minimum A tier. And this is great. It's a fucking great OP. It's a shame it took until the last 4 episodes for it to get started. But then another one of the warning signs that this show was about to, like, go off the rails was, it's not. Now, I'm gonna be fair when I say this. It might not have been obvious if you didn't know that this show had to postpone its last 3 episodes. But episodes 8 and 9 did look noticeably a bit more still framey than the first 7 episodes. Well, slightly noticeably. I'm not going to say it was, like, super obvious, because they're still really good looking episodes, but there were a lot more shots. There were more shots where it was just like, oh, that looks a little awkward. Oh, they're definitely, like, trying to save on time here, so on and so forth. So I guess in the end, I guess it worked out because like the last 3 episodes are also really solid looking. Although I would say the first half is still like the best looking part of this show. Um, but here's the thing about delaying a production. Bug Films, which is the studio for this, is a brand new studio who I believe split off from OLM because they were. You know what? I'm not going to speculate on the reasons why they decided to split from OLM. But now you have this like full brand new studio, and their first production collapses. So, in terms of a business transaction, they failed to deliver their final product at the when it needed to be delivered. And so that's going to drastically change the culture of how Bug Films functions. Now, you could speculate on why the production eventually collapsed. My speculation is that they simply did not allocate time properly. They went way too hard all the time. And again, we have the final product now, and so the final package as a whole, there's really nothing wrong with it. It's just that they did not budget their time, not money. I know I use the word budget. I'm speaking like metaphorically in terms of budgeting the time properly, budgeting your staff resources properly, so that the schedule would not fall apart. And so I'm very curious as to what's going to happen with Bug Films later, when they eventually get more projects, if they get more projects, because a lot of production committees might not want to work with them anymore now that they failed to deliver a product, which sucks because the product that they delivered was really damn good in the end, but that is a thing that's they're going to have to deal with now. Or are they going to pull back and be a lot more restrained with their future productions and just not leave the same amount of impact? It's going to be interesting. I've talked for like 5 minutes now just on the production circumstances of this show. But like, man, it's a fucking great looking show. The character designs are phenomenal. Like, they've got the archetypes down while also like really nailing the like specifics and like the uniqueness to make them stand out. They feel comfortable, but also like different enough to be like, I'm going to remember these designs in the future for a while. Pretty much all of them, especially Shizuka. Definitely one of the hottest anime characters of the year. I love it. Also really liked Tendo's design. He was just the like happy-go-lucky kind of protagonist. Reminded me a lot, both in personality and in terms of like visual design, of Midoriya from My Hero. Definitely got those vibes from him. I'm pretty sure someone else has also brought that up at some point, but I definitely get that vibe from him. But yeah, visually fucking phenomenal series. The color direction is so vivid and eye-grabbing and just constantly vying for your attention and just demanding that you look at the screen. Eventually, it does go a little, well, I'm not going to say it goes overboard, but it does make some decisions that I was not, that I would have changed up a little bit. Whereas, like, the one I'm thinking of in particular is, like, the rainbow blood splatters, where it kind of looks like paint. It looks like the blood is essentially like paint, And I think it worked for like the opening uh episode where it's this zombie explosion has actually brightened up Tendo's life to a significant degree, brought color back into his dead end life. Um, Although even in that moment, I still thought like the particular color choices. I'm nitpicking. I am obviously nitpicking here. Um, I just want it was just something on my mind. But like aside from that, production design is super fucking good. Um, Action scenes are hype. Although this is definitely one of those anime where physics is not a thing. Like the physics does not work properly in this show. So if that's gonna be a sticking point for you, that's your heads up, I guess. Like I'm pretty episode 4 or 5, I think, the aquarium one. I'm pretty sure that's not how batteries work. Um, the way that people land after jumping off of like high buildings and cars and stuff, it could be, maybe it's like that, maybe it's not. This show really pushes like suspension of disbelief, especially when they're just like knocking shit around. Um, Now in something like High School of the Dead, I think you're a little more prepped for that because High School of the Dead is fucking nonsense from the get-go. Um, Actually, I have not seen High School of the Dead in like 12 years, so I can't even be certain that I'm making a good comparison here, so I'm just going to stop. Uh, Aside from the visual aspects, though, this is a very compelling narrative. I love this idea of flipping the script on the zombie apocalypse. Like, this idea that, like, oh, for some people, an apocalypse is actually a good thing. Like, people who are trapped in a dead-end job where joy has been completely drained from their life and they're forgetting why they are living in the first place because Japan is one of those hyper-capitalist societies that just drives its workers into the fucking dirt. And societal collapse is pretty much the only thing that could change that. I hate to say it, but that's pretty much the only way that these systems can be undone at this point. And so for people who are completely trapped by that system, this is an opportunity to start fresh. It's a pretty cynical way to look at it, but it is kind of true. And this first episode does a fucking great job of portraying how Tendo is just trapped in this world and how it is just his job is just sucking every bit of life out of him, just leeching off of him in this hyper corporatist way, just treating him like a tool, treating him like a resource to be spent up. And the way that it, like, only slightly satirizes, like, abusive workplace culture, it's very clever and very, relevant to a lot of, discourse that we have today. Reminds me a little bit of, Cells at Work Code Black, in that both are very much based around this idea of black companies, like these exploitative companies and such. Although I think I like this quite a bit more than Code Black. I just like that it's a super fresh take on the zombie formula. I'm sure it's been done elsewhere, but I haven't seen it. Like, the closest to this kind of take on, like, a zombie apocalypse where it's like, oh, you can actually, like, do things, is, like, Zombieland. So, and this is, like, way more optimistic than Zombieland. Not Zombieland Saga, not the Idol anime. Zombieland, the Woody Harrelson, Jesse Eisenberg movie. I still haven't seen the sequel to that. I heard it was good. But anyway, I also like that it's that this is a like that it brings up explicitly political things in this show. Like just in case for the idiots in the back, for the people in my fucking comment section about, no, it's not about black companies at all. You're reading too much into it. Let's drill it in just a little bit more by making it as explicit as possible that this is a political show. With examples like Shizuka's dad was apparently a partner of Lehman Brothers and was part of the the recession in '08, which, like, wow, that is definitely a thing to call back to. And it fits really well with how his character is portrayed as this, like, ultimate corporate scumbag of just climbing to the top, and it's like, other people are just things to be used by us, the elite, and such. And then there was, like, in the village, one of the old man referenced the TPP, what was it, Trans-Pacific Partnership, which was going to be like a trading bill. That's from the Obama years, I think. That was going to have a very hugely negative effect. I've forgotten the specifics of the TPP. At the time, I recall I was very concerned about how it was going to affect art, I guess, like artistic production and such. Little did I know that anime production was just going to get immensely worse anyway, without it. So, but anyway, this is an explicitly political show. It does not hide that fact at all. And that's really cool. And it's surprisingly kind of nuanced about it in a lot of areas, where it's just like, a lot of the problems are cyclical. These are like cycles that people get caught up in, and perpetuating the cycle makes it worse and harder to break out of. So, very fun stuff. And apparently there was some backlash to the, like, climactic arc of this season, with the social outcasts who just decided to burn this village down because for reasons. Well, the reasons are actually, like, pretty obvious and easy to understand. It's like, to them, this village that they have to work in is just another society that doesn't respect them. And all of them are total fucking scumbags in very interesting and believable ways. Like, we have the my bitch wife guy, which has become, I love that is in internet discourse, that has become like the ultimate punching bag trope now. The my bitch wife guy who just hates the fact that he has to reciprocate feelings, I guess. No, that's a wrong way to look at it. Just like hates the fact that his wife is an independent person who also needs, like, love and respect, and not just you. We have this uptight corporate office lady who refuses to admit that anything outside of what she does could possibly be correct. We have this really scumbag worker, fat dude who just does not contribute, who refuses to like take responsibility and like actually try to better himself in any way. And we have this sort of introverted guy who blames blames extroverted people for him not doing well in society, instead of grappling with the fact that he is introverted and that there are ways for people who are introverts to succeed. It's this very obvious contrast of like, society is going to fuck you up, but there are ways that you can get around it. We have this, and Tendo is a good way of getting around it. And it's like, these are problems that like are very easy to relate to, I guess. Like for example, I don't have a girlfriend, but it's not society's fault that I don't have a girlfriend. It's because I am not making the effort to have one. I am not making myself someone that someone would want to date. I am not someone who is emotionally available for a reciprocal relationship. And therefore, I don't have a partner. I don't blame society for that. And I am working on ways to improve myself in that regard. But it's not but I'm not going around like, it's your fault that I don't have a girlfriend. So it's like a really interesting way of looking at it, in that, and also in that, I wonder if me a decade ago would have thought the same way. I do wonder that, because I have not always been a good person. I don't even think I'm a good person now, but I was definitely a worse person in the past. And so it makes me reflect on whether I would have, if the me from like 10 years ago or 12 years ago would have been more on the lines of Higurashi, who is the guy I was talking about, who like this introverted guy who just blames society for everything, or if I would have been a Tendo who would have taken the chance to just start fresh. It's interesting for me to think about. Yeah, this show is actually really damn good, and like the cast on the whole is super likable and fun. I like that they had this abuse parallel between Tendo and Shizuka, where like Shizuka immediately is like, oh, he's trapped in a cycle of abuse just like I was. But she doesn't really have the tools to deal with that for someone else until like the very last minute, where it's like, okay, all or nothing, let's see if this works. Yeah, really liked the show. Again, the physics of the action scenes do get a little too much. That's like my biggest sticking point with the show, to be honest. But like I can get over that in a zombie series. I can get over that. Yeah, this show is really good. I hope Bug Films gets the chance to do more stuff in the future, because I sure as hell enjoyed this. Goddamn, I fucking love them horse girls. I just finished all of Uma Musume Road to the Top. That was damn fun. Only 4 episodes, which was surprising, but I guess this was just like a mini-series. And apparently it was directed by a Chinese director. I forget, it was like Cheng Zi something. Which does make sense, because there are a lot of shots in this series that, if you are like vaguely familiar with Chinese animation, there are definitely some like character movements and camera movements that are more typical of Chinese animation than they are of anime. But also, what I noticed immediately is, holy shit, this show looks incredible. Like, it's not as consistently good looking as season 2, but I think this might have higher peaks than season 2, because there is just absolute fucking explosions of unhinged animation, especially in that last race where everything just, the line work just goes absolutely fucking feral, and just the way that the way everything is composited looks so fucking cool. It reminds me a little bit of Fate Grand Order, the TV series, in terms of like the color design and compositing. And but I watched the first episode. I'm like, fuck, they're going hard on the animation. So I looked into the staff, and I got to the chief animation director, and I looked at his stuff. It's just Doga Kobo, Doga Kobo, Doga Kobo. I'm like, there it is. There it is. And apparently the director was for this show was the director of photography for Anima Yell, which was also a Doga Kobo show. I love me some Doga Kobo animation. Although I don't think, off the top of my head, I don't think I know any Doga Kobo shows that are as explosive as this. But also I don't think there are many Doga Kobo shows with settings that allow for stuff to be as explosive as this. Yeah, the animation is really the star of the show here. Again, there are definitely some, like, a couple compositing issues here and there. The CG models come out pretty frequently. But man, those peaks are so fucking peak that it more than makes up for it. Like, even though the story is good, the animation just vastly outshines it. But speaking of which, pretty solid story. I pretty much enjoyed in the moment, I enjoyed pretty much all of it. Really liked our 3 leads for this one. Top Road is our typical, Genki girl-ish kind of archetype, just works hard for everyone's sake. And that kind of comes back to bite her because the pressure just gets to her of not wanting to disappoint everyone. And then we have Ayabe with the weirdest internal conflict that I've seen, definitely from this franchise, possibly from a lot of anime, where she is basically running for her sister who died in the womb with her. Wild shit. It gives that arc definitely, or that character arc definitely gives us that angst that Uma Musume occasionally dips into with this pseudo dark character kind of stuff. It never goes too far with any of that, but it has a pretty fun it had a pretty fun resolution, and it really ramped up but it also really ramped up the tension between her and Top Road. And then we have Opera O, TM Opera O, who doesn't really have any conflicts in this series because she is just a giant ball of confidence, and she's just like, I'm going to win because I am me. Fuck you. The one thing where I guess I could kind of critique the story is pretty much after the first race, I knew pretty much every major story beat as to how this series was going to be structured. It's like, okay, this person won the first race, therefore this person has to win the second race in the second episode. Third episode's going to be the break episode, and then the last person has to win the race in the last episode. So, again, it was still fun to watch, but if you're looking for something that's not predictable, you're not going to find it here. But But yeah, all the characters were super fun to follow. Loved Opera O's voice acting. Apparently I'm used to her playing like more cutesy voices in anime. So this more boisterous Onesama kind of voice. No, not Onesama, just like that Takarazuka male sounding voice, I guess. I don't know what the term for that kind of voice is. Maybe one of you will know in the comments. But loved her voice acting. Opera O, best girl. Yeah, not a whole lot to talk about with this one, really. It's just a quick in and out 4 episodes. With that Uma Musume hype that you usually get. I do think the length does hurt it a little bit in some areas, in that we don't get quite as much characterization as we could have. Like, we could have used a few more downtime moments that would have also helped with the predictability elements. And so, like, the emotional heights don't end up being as high as Season 2. But damn, that final race was still fucking hype. Really enjoyed that. Uma Musume is still good. Can't wait to get to Season 3 in, like, 6 months.
So I didn't actually do a seasonal wrap-up show entry for this next one, so I'm just going to take a section of a video from my main channel and just slot it in right here where I talk about this specific entry in the most recent Pokemon anime. And then you can go check out the full video if you want to see me talk about Pokemon more. Anyway, here we go. And so we come to the grand finale, the last hurrah of Ash and Pikachu's journey through this fantastical world, aimed to be a Pokemon master. With this being the last arc of a 25-year run, there were certainly a lot of expectations that would naturally come with this ending. Would it be one last epic adventure that ranks amongst the most intense we've seen so far? Would it be a series of conclusive reunions and resolutions to tie up all the loose ends Ash has left during his journey across the world? Would it be a series of intensely thematic episodes that attempt to answer the all-important question of what it truly means to be a Pokemon master? The reality, as we now know, was actually none of these things. Instead, we basically just got more Pokemon the same way we always have. 11 episodes of mostly low-stakes and down-to-earth adventures. Really, its only unique attributes are that Misty and Brock come back, and there's a subplot involving Latias. Yes, it does play heavily into nostalgia and fan service by cycling through as many of Ash's previous Pokemon as possible, but aside from that, everything else is just business as usual. And frankly, I think that's kinda cool, and very fitting. Ash has basically done it all at this point. He's the world champion and he's saved the world several times over, even outside the high-stakes plots normally reserved for the movies. There's really nothing else they could come up with that could top anything that's come before. It's also not like his journey is actually coming to an end. This is just the last that we get to see of it as the audience, even though his journey towards becoming a Pokemon master will extend well into the future. Speaking of which, what exactly is a Pokemon master? What conclusion does Ash finally come to on that? Well, if you were looking for some grand sweeping gesture that tied everything together in a neat little bow, you probably weren't watching the same series I was for the past quarter century. Would I have liked that? Of course I would. Who wouldn't want a larger-than-life resolution to this 25-year odyssey? Instead, we got the pretty obvious answer from a character whose motivations have always been as obvious as they could possibly be. Being a Pokemon master means being friends with every Pokemon in the world, meaning that there's always more adventure ahead. Simple and straightforward, yet endlessly ambitious and full of optimism. A very Ash way to live right to the very end. And that's it. Ash and Pikachu run off into the sunset, and their journey continues forevermore. Honestly, my initial plans before watching this final arc was to do a video just on Aim to be a Pokemon Master, and in hindsight, I'm very glad I didn't do that because, surprisingly, there's really nothing incredibly intriguing about this segment on its own, though it's still immensely fun and exciting throughout. Much like Ash's battle strategy, this ending was completely unexpected, yet still superbly entertaining and enjoyable down to the very last moment.
Yep, I love that KyoAni is still the party equivalent of shows up to the party, does sick ass dance move, says nothing, leaves. Just watched the Euphonium OVA Ensemble contest. That was good. That was really good. It's basically exactly what you would expect from a 50-minute UFO OVA. We got some really nice Reina Kumiko moments where we see like the more complex give and takes of their friendship, I guess you could say, where it's like they're starting to be a little more upfront with their insecurities towards each other, I guess, which was really fun. And also just the banter is still really good. Really good, like, just high school level banter. It's fun. I like when people actually know how to write high schoolers properly. It makes me happy. Instead of just writing them like adults, but children. Yeah. Honestly, not a whole lot to say about this one in particular, other than I guess it's good to see more KyoAni again. Like I didn't watch Tsurune Season 2 because I didn't really get far in the first season. So, before this, the most recent KyoAni thing I watched was Dragon Maid Season 2, and that was in 2021. And I think I might have watched the Violet Evergarden OVA, the movie, slightly after that. So, it's been a hot minute since I've seen new KyoAni stuff. I did recently rewatch all of UFO with my dad and my sister for our anime night stuff. All of that still really holds up, and this is right up there with it. Just some really great, really low-key but really solid character writing. A lot of really good acting, not just in voice acting, but also in the actual character acting, the animation to show not just through dialogue how these characters feel, but conveying their emotions through their gestures, through the way they stand, through the way they walk. Stuff that KyoAni is really fucking good at, and continues to be really fucking good at, because this OVA is so incredibly detailed and gorgeous looking. Really smart use of CG. That never really detracts from the experience. Mostly in how vehicles and background, moving background animation. Just the opening shots of this was just oh right, KyoAni is the best, and nobody can touch them. I forgot. It's been a while. I forgot that they are just a league above. I also kind of liked that Kumiko and Reina's ensemble didn't win. They got the popularity vote, but they didn't get the student vote. It was just some random clarinet quartet won. So that was amusing to me, and also I like that it's also like these aren't a super group kind of people. They're just really good, but they're not like unstoppable. Our main characters are not unstoppable. So that was neat. Uh, I was the music itself wasn't super amazing this time around. It wasn't bad, but like it didn't grab me like maybe like the ensemble piece from season 1 or like Liz and the Bluebird or Asuka's like Euphonium solo. It was still good though. Yeah, Euphonium's still really good. I think third season is in the spring, I think. Whenever it's happening, I'm absolutely looking forward to it. You know, I really don't understand Mal scores sometimes because that shit fucking ruled. I just finished all of Uma Musume Season 3, which, if I recall correctly, is a whole 0.4 of a point lower on Mal than Season 2. Now, I do still think Season 2 is better, but not that much better. Like, I still really love Season 2. It's like a strong 8 nearing a light 9 for me, but goddamn if Season 3 ain't really fucking good, too. I guess I'll just get out of the way the things that I guess don't make it quite as good. One, I think its first episode was a little underwhelming, I guess. Again, it does all, like, for one, it still does the thing that I am still disappointed with Uma Musume on the whole, in that the idol concert parts are just an afterthought. I really like that element of Uma Musume, and it refuses to give me more of it. We got one concert in this season, and it was at the very, very end. And it was a really good concert, too. So, I'm happy we at least got one, but, man, I wish we had more. But also, this, that makes a good comparison for, like, in terms of, like, first episodes between Season 2 and Season 3, whereas, like, Season 2 had this absolutely fucking explosive first episode, non-stop right out of the gate, and ended with an absolutely baller idol concert. And Season 3 didn't quite have that. It just felt like any other episode of the show, I guess. So, the first episode was a little underwhelming. And then on the whole, one of the things that I had a little bit of a complaint about with this was the friendship between Kita-san Black and Satono Diamond not being as prevalent in the first half of this series. Like, we already know from Season 2 that they've been, like, best friends since childhood. And we literally see them sleeping with, like, plushies of each other, which is, like, the cutest thing ever. But we don't really get a lot of, like, really good interactions between them until, like, after the halfway point, when Diamond finally starts becoming more prevalent in the story. It's either, like, just before the halfway point or right at it. I can't quite remember. But once they do start doing that, they actually do like a good job of it, of conveying like, oh, these are like best friends and like I get it. There's not really a rivalry between them, but they are like really good friends, and I guess that's another really obvious comparison to Season 2 with the friendship/rivalry between Tokai Teo and Meijiro McQueen, where it's like that rivalry was like what drove Season 2 so hard, or was one of the things that drove that season so hard, whereas Kita-san has a lot more like different rivalries with different other people, with like Duramente and what was the other one? Like Cheval Crown, I think was her name. Or no, that's Satono Crown. Cheval something was one of them. But this season is definitely much more of just about Kita-san, and that Diamond is not nearly as prevalent a character as McQueen was in comparison to Teo. So I guess that would explain why people didn't like this season as much, but I still think this was a really damn good season. The hype was still there. This season taught me that this show is really good at montages. Like, exceptionally good at montages. Where it's like, you kind of just take montages for granted a lot of time. Where it's like, oh, it's like, you just doing this to skip time or fill time. And Musume does both of those, but it does both of those really well. It's really good at making training montages feel like a lot of progress is being made, and like we're actually feeling the character grow along with it. But then there are like the more atmospheric, ambient montages. Like episode 9, I believe, is her like day trip with between Kita-san and Diamond, and like it's just these very long montages of them going to see things and like traveling around, and it was very like engrossing in like an almost Iyashike kind of way, like very relaxing and atmospheric, and it was just really good at that. So hats off to figuring out how montages work. Fucking Kei Oikawa is crushing it with this series. I think he should do more series like this and not like idle series. Like, what was it, Shine Post? I wasn't a huge fan of. Like, he's still a really good he still directed that really well, but I think his talents are much more for hype kind of things, and then filling in the gaps in that hype with relaxation and fun moments and stuff. But yeah. God, this show is so fucking good. Kita-san's whole arc through this series was so satisfying. With the exception of like that first episode felt a little off, I guess, in setting up her character. And there were a few moments in like the first half where it was like, oh, are we gonna make her like a whiny kind of character? I might not like that, but she grows out of that as the series goes on. I really enjoyed where this character started and where she ended. Really solid, like just very like traditional, well-defined character arc that was just very satisfying to watch. And goddamn, she's charismatic. This Genki horse girl. The extreme training she does with Bourbon was super fun. Yeah, like goddamn, I really like Kita-san. Like where is it? You can, I don't know if you can see it back there, but I got a Tokai. Well, I'll just bring it up right now. This is one of the more expensive figures that I own. It's a Tokai Teo in her usual racing outfit, and I'm thinking about getting a Kita-san figure now, because man, that just the the way that she draws you in, she is a very fitting successor to Teo in a lot of ways, and like that energy that draws you in, the never give up kind of attitude. And I think I really liked like the particular of the arc that they picked for her for this season, where it's like, where season 2 a lot of it was based around like injury and recovering from injury. This one is just like, I'm just gonna keep plowing ahead, and then you realize that you hit your peak. Like, you have crested your peak, and you're like, well, it is going to go down from here. Do I continue to go down, or do I end it here? Which is very paralleled really well with Gold Ship, who, honestly, up until now, I have not been that big a fan of as a character, but man, her little bit in this season was fucking great, of her graduating from the Twinkle series. Like, she is someone who, like, has passed her peak and has been past her peak for a very long time, and she's the one to point out to Kita-san, like, hey, you're past your peak. That's what you're feeling right now. And so to see, like, the contrast between Gold Ship, who's just racing until it is just absolutely impossible for her to win anymore, versus Kita-san, who wants to go out, like, at her, just on her own terms, like, at her peak. So I didn't even realize that until I was, like, talking about this. So, yeah, really, really strong character arc for Kita-san, and, like, this very much reminded me a lot of, like, when I was in high school, I was in marching band, like, competitive marching band, Bands of America stuff, if you're familiar with that. And a lot of the, like, hype moments and, like, the crowd cheering moments, like, really brought back a lot of memories of that for me, especially in that final episode where it's like, you're doing it for yourself to perform well, but also you're doing it to make the people watching you happy, to bring joy to the people that you are performing this for, or in this case, racing for. And, yeah. The last episode was so hype. And I like how they convey, like, Kita-san's condition in these last few episodes, where it's like, you really feel how tired she is. Like, episode 11, I felt out of breath watching her in this episode. I was like, God damn. She's on her last legs here. God damn, this show is so good, and it's still just as visually impressive as ever. It might not have had quite as many, like, really dramatically explosive animation moments, and I think that's just because the story wasn't written that way. Like, season 2 was significantly more melodramatic than season 1. So there's not as much room for the animation to do these big explosive, like, crying monologue moments, I guess, that season 2 had. But season 3 still had compensated for that in other areas, like, especially in the more, like, ambient moments, again, like in episode 9. Yeah, this franchise is still really fucking good. Now I have to figure out if I liked this more than Over the Road to the Top or not. Oh, that's gonna be a hard one. But yeah, love this season. Looking forward to the movie whenever that comes out. I love me some horse girls. There are some truisms about the world. Water is wet, the sun rises every day, and Morio Osaka continues to be the best director for shoujo/shoujo adjacent anime rom-coms. I just finished all of My Love Story with Yamada-kun at level 999. This was a fun-ass show, super bubbly and funny, super wholesome, but with just the right amount of emotional edge to it. Just the right amount of people being shitheads. Because, like, I don't like my romances to be super conflicty. That's just not my vibe. But when it but when there's no conflict whatsoever, it can come off as like kind of bland and like too easy, I guess. So this one like runs right down the middle of like, oh, is there gonna be conflict? Oh, I could see this being a problem, but then it gets resolved, and you're like, whew, safe. Speaking of which, all the characters in this show are incredible. Akane as our MC, just this bubbly, almost duncy kind of lead girl. Love that this takes place like this is an interesting kind of setting because it splits the difference between college and high school settings. Like Akane is in college and then Yamada-kun is in high school. So we kind of get the best of both worlds in this. Like we get the like traditional like anime setting of high school, so it doesn't have to like dip too far out of that territory, but also we get college kids who can drink. Man, do I love a good anime drunk. Akane's drunk escapades were quite fun. Probably she might be my favorite drunk character in anime. Just the way that she is drunk, like the giddiness, the forgetfulness, the way that she moves in the show. She might be my favorite like drunk character in anime because it's just so real. Like I have seen this person in real life. It's so accurate. But yeah, Akane's great lead character. Super well-rounded. Just generally very fun to be around. And on the opposite end, we have Yamada, who is like the opposite of well-rounded, I guess, where he's got very specific things that he's very good at, and then other things where he's just a complete dunce at. Like, he's obviously very good at gaming, and he's also extraordinarily kind. Like, he just has this intuitive kindness to him, but he is very socially inept, and that leads him to be like being very blunt and brash a lot of times. Just can be a little insensitive, even though he doesn't mean to be insensitive, and he just kind of intuitively knows what the right thing is to do to make people happy, and in particular to make Akane happy. And watching him like slowly gain more social awareness as this series goes on was a really fun arc to see for this character. I know I personally relate to him a lot with just not getting social cues sometime. We're anime fans. This is us. This is us. But despite his social ineptitude, he has really strong chemistry with Akane, who is just this bubbly ball of sunshine, even when she's down in the dumps. And they have great like chemistry, both as friends and romantic chemistry. There is some really romantic scenes in this, even though we don't get like the confession until the very end of the season. By the way, I hope this gets another season. I would like another season of this to see what they're like as a couple. That would be interesting to see. Yeah, there's some pretty like sultry moments in this, and just very intimate kind of moments, like when Akane is like sick and Yamada has to take her to the hospital and then take care of her. Just really good like romance moments. It's like that blended with like very standard anime tropes. Like we've got the dangerous Japanese flu that can kill you. the anime flu that can like completely kill a man. So that was fun. Yeah, our two leads are really great, and the whole supporting cast is really strong as too. We got Eita as the cross playing in terms of his video game character, kind of group mom of sorts. Except he's also really hot. Most of the characters in this are really hot, like the guys and the girls. Then we have like his little sister Runa, who was probably the biggest source of tension in just being like a bratty high schooler. Or no, she's a middle schooler, I think. Just being a bratty middle schooler who doesn't want stuff to change around her. She doesn't want to let other people in. She's just fine with her group, and she doesn't want that group to get bigger because it's a pain. And watching her like work through those emotions and grow closer to Akane was really fun. I love what's Takezo, the old man of the group. He's just this absolute pure-hearted man who's just like so fun. Like, I feel like he would like start crying if you said something mean to him. But he is just so precious, and but also like very like I will do whatever I can to help the people around me, or to help my friends. He's just so precious and wholesome. I love him. And, all the characters in this are great. Momo, Akane's like best friend. Tsubaki, who's the other romantic rival in this series. The way her arc ends might have been a little too clean, I guess, but still very fun to watch her go through these very complicated emotions. I did like there was a very noticeable difference between like what Tsubaki points out is why she likes Yamada versus all of the good points that Akane points out about Yamada, and I think that's visually, like, you can see through Yamada's facial expressions that he values Akane's a lot more than Tsubaki's. So that was really fun. Yeah, that's the other thing about this show is the presentation is just really fucking on point. It's a Morio Osaka shoujo-ish kind of series. I keep saying shoujo-ish because I don't think this is technically shoujo. I don't think it ran in a shoujo magazine, so that's not why I'm not calling it shoujo. I could be wrong, but it definitely feels like a shoujo, right down to the like very the constant like right. There's this thing in shoujo manga where it's in all manga, but it is much more prevalent in shoujo, where a characters will be speaking, but then there will be like extra dialogue in super small script next to the character's head, and they do that in the anime. Like they don't like have the characters voice acted, but the text is there as like extra verbal dialogue. So, and of course it's Morio Osaka directing it. This is the guy who did Cardcaptor Sakura and Ore Monogatari. I know there's a bunch of others that he's done, but I can't name them off the top of my head. But I think it's been a while since he's directed something. Like, I think the last thing he directed prior to this was Cardcaptor Sakura Clear Card, which I wasn't as huge a fan of. But that was also before I got Magical Girl pilled, I think. So I wonder if I go back and rewatch that, I'll like that more. And I might like the original Cardcaptor Sakura more. Yeah, just the presentation for this show is just so solid. I think I only caught like 2 minor animation errors or just faults throughout the entire series. One was like I vaguely noticed a CG crowd shot, and the other was like between cuts the position of a character on a bench changed slightly. aside from that, this show is just so on point with its visuals, super strong character designs, really great color design, and just the visual directing is really great. The way things are framed, the extra visual imagery of stuff, like putting it, like the way he like shows the passage of time by layering clocks over things, was really fun. I think my favorite like visual joke slash imagery is like when Momo is just doing some verbal jabs at Akane, and it's like a POV shot from Akane's point of view, and you see like the screen like flash red for a sec in like a radial kind of pattern, sort of the way that like if you got hit in a video game and your screen would like flash red when you're taking damage. So really liked that. Oh, all the gaming elements were pretty fun with this too. They were pretty bare bones, but they worked well in terms of like developing the chemistry of the different characters, and just it was an easy way to get all of these characters to converse in a different setting other than like a cafe or something. And the way that different characters come to this game for different reasons was really fun to see as well. And the different level of investment in the game, and so on and so forth. This was just a super strong visually. Again, when it really wants to crank up like the emotion of a scene, the color design is so good and the lighting's so good. The contrast and like color tones between like Akane and Yamada to show like the sunshine radiance versus like the icy sort of standoffishness or just coolness of Akane or of Yamada. This is just a really visually solid show with really strong like visual cues to make things look more interesting than just back and forth talking. And also the soundtrack was really solid too. Like there's one track that sounded almost like lo-fi-ish. Like it reminded me of like Nujabe's tracks. Almost. Like there was one track in there like that. And then there's like some really good like orchestral pieces, some really good piano pieces, just perfect tone setters. But that lo-fi track, I'm gonna have to find it later because I just really enjoyed it. Speaking of sound, I believe Inori Minase was Akane in this. Pitch perfect. Absolutely spot on for this character. Super great acting. I really enjoyed this show. I saw Shaw posting about it when it was airing, and I'm like, okay, Shaw's usually on point with like finding really good anime that no one's talking about. This was a damn good show. I wouldn't mind a season 2. Good times. Now that's what I'm fucking talking about. I am feeling the magic and whimsy coursing through my body. Oh, that was good. I just finished up both parts of the Ancient Magus Bride Season 2. Definitely happy I watched them both back to back, and that was some good shit. Leading off with what I was just talking about, this is one of the few shows that I've seen, period, where magic like really feels like something special and like wonderful and awe-inspiring. It feels like when you were reading Harry Potter for the first time. It feels like all of those like magical fantasy stuff in the vein of like British high fantasy, and like British children's fantasy, I guess in particular. Except Ancient Magus Bride also has some very dark stuff woven into it as well. And it manages to balance those out really well. First season, I don't think it was quite as good at balancing the light and the dark stuff, which I think might have been one of the reasons why the back few episodes of the first season I was not a fan of at all. Like, it really tanked a lot of my thoughts on the first season. Although I have not watched the first season since it finished airing in 2018. So, I'm not sure how I would feel about it now. I might feel a little bit more invested in it now. But didn't go back and rewatch it for this. And so I was kind of left to just sort of fill in some of the gaps too of like, what does this mean? Why is this like this? What's this curse? So on and so forth. But I think I picked it up pretty well. They did a good job of reminding everybody of the things that have happened previously. But yeah, this world is so fucking cool and like just interesting, and you want to engross yourself in this world and all the weird fantasy stuff that happens. Like, and I love that so much stuff just happens without explanation. I love that there are just like there's just like a lizard in a top hat and a suit coat that like checks people's IDs at the school. He doesn't get an introduction. He barely gets any lines of dialogue, but you just know that that's what he's there for. And it's just so cool. And there's so many, like dozens of details like that in this show where it's just sort of like, why is that there? 'Cause it's magic. Duh. And it just like it makes sense, and it just like there's so much stuff in this that does it. There's a lot of stuff in this that if they went out of their way to explain it, it would ruin like the magic of it. Like, there is something magical about just knowing that a thing exists and not knowing all the specific details of why it exists. Which is a very fine line to walk. I'm not saying like it's always a positive for these kinds of shows, but like if you can pull it off, man, it feels really good. And when you like, it's also because I have some vague knowledge of like British folklore and history and stuff. When it like hits those like moments of like, oh, we're gonna talk about this thing, it just, you get the chills of like, oh, holy shit. Like when they brought in the back end of part 2, when the Morrigan shows up, I was just like, oh boy, we're in for some stuff now. And wow, she was a really fun character with so many interesting facets to her. It's like, man, I love the world of the Ancient Magus Bride. It is such a great melding of different magical folklores and stuff throughout, like English and Norse and Celtic and Germanic and Gaelic mythologies and such. It's just so much fun. And not just fun, but how do I want to describe? Sorry, it's almost midnight by the time I'm recording this, but I stayed up just to finish all this because it's so good. And I pointed this out on Twitter a little while ago, but like there is something in this series that feels spiritual. Like the way that the magic chants that the go, like the flowing poetry of it all, the gravitas which certain things are treated with, the way that things that you interact with this world through touch, through sight, through offerings, it feels weighty. Like it feels like this. It just makes this world feel so much more real and fantastical at the same time, and it's just so wonderful. Like there is a, it inspires a deep reverence for certain things. Like Morrigan is a great example of it, where it's like, it's just so big and powerful sometimes, and yet at the same time it can also be very intimate and very closed in, like very just very small. It can really zoom in on the very small details of things, the way that characters interact with each other and touch each other, and just the way that emotions are conveyed in this is so fucking good. And that's another one of the things, aside from the like the general atmosphere of it and like the thrill of like the main plot of this season, the character interactions and the way that these characters like slowly develop and become more complex with each passing episode was just so fucking engrossing and wonderful. I was like, it's been a while since I've had a show where I'm like, I need to get back to watching this. I need to finish my work day so that I can come home and watch more of this show. That is how much I got invested in these characters. I loved all of the new cast for this series. I love Lucy as like this very standoffish girl who is working through family annihilation trauma, essentially. Philomena's arc throughout this both seasons of this was fairly basic, but the like weight of it and the visuals that are used to convey it make it so powerful and evoking of emotion that it was like just so gratifying to finally see her overcome the burden that her grandmother had placed on her. God, and the way that all these characters, the way that all of their backstories like interweave with each other and like build on top of each other in really fascinating and interesting ways was just so fun. This is such a dense, very dense series that's so fun to explore every facet of. Like even some of the like more minor characters, like the headmaster, the principal of the college that they go to, has just this very like awe-inspiring kind of aura to her, in like that she's like very like polite and very like approachable, but also she gives off the vibe of like, oh, she could like destroy me in an instant probably. God, this is such a cool fucking series. And I loved how Chise develops in this series even more, building off of her what I vaguely recall of her from season 1. We're now starting to get into like, okay, you're like a very self-sacrificing kind of character, That's kind of bad. It's going to get you killed one day. You need to like start thinking through things. And very slowly she does get to that point, and like she actually like thinks about what that means. Like she thinks about the fact that like there are, if I keep charging in blindly, I'm going to just die at one of these at some point. But that also means that when I don't charge in to potentially sacrifice myself, that means somebody might die, and people are dying around me now, and I just kind of have to live with that. Such a very complicated way to view this idea. That honestly I don't really see all that much. Like normally it's with anime you get like the reverse character arc of like the character who like doesn't spring into action, the character who's like constantly overthinking things and is like nervous to jump in and stuff like that. So here we have the reverse of the character who always jumps in immediately, and that's a bad thing. So really like that. Really liked the development with Elias this season of like starting to narrow in on what precisely he views his relationship with Chise as, and how he like his emotions or lack thereof set him apart from humanity, and how he is slowly becoming more human with Chise's help. It's just so... The cast of this show is so fucking good. It's so goddamn good. And, of course, the visuals definitely help that to a very large extent. I've heard some murmurings of how people were upset that this wasn't as good looking as season 1. Again, I only remember like the dragon scene from season 1 in terms of like visual awe-inspiringness. But goddamn, these seasons still look pretty fucking good. It looks better than 90% of the other shows that I've seen from 2023. And if you've been following the seasonal wrap-up show for a while, you know we're almost at the end of 2023. So if this is in like the top 10%, I'm really saying something about it. This is, the fucking character designs are super solid, almost always on point and on model, and just detailed in all of the right ways that make their expressions pop and just really stick with you. The conveyance of magic and magical creatures and the creativity of their designs is so fucking good. I guess if I had to pick an area where it falters is sometimes like the actual like action scenes aren't quite as good as everything else. They're still really solid, but this season definitely relies a lot more on some CG builds than it does in other aspects in terms of the fight, in terms of like the action scenes. But it's not like really terrible CG. It is above average CG. The compositing's not perfect, but it definitely gets there. It definitely does what it has to do to look good enough, I would say. And again, the designs make up for it. The color design makes up for it. The lighting makes up for it. There's just some absolutely beautiful shots in this. Like, part 2, episode 9, so that would be episode 21, I guess. The color design in that is so fucking good. That's like the after hours like haunted school tour kind of thing. So fucking good. And even that there was one really impressive Sakuga sequence in the final episode where where Philomena's squaring off against her grandmother. Like, just the way that it moved, it was very, it wasn't like this big well, it was explosive, but it wasn't like this super fast moving high octane action scene. It was a very deliberate flow of motion and particle effects and like lighting and line work and stuff that was it really stuck with me. I think the animation looks good. I don't know what everyone else is complaining about. I could potentially say that it's not as good as season 1, but I haven't seen season 1 in 5 years, so I can't say for sure. What I can say is definitely the same, because I do remember this about season 1, is the music is fucking insane and awesome and incredible. Oh, I'm sorry, I do want to talk about one more thing about the visuals. Like, there is just such detail in, like the attention to detail and stuff. Like, there's a scene where someone's, like, cutting a tomato, and you can actually see, like, the runoff of the juice from the tomato on the cutting board. Which, I have seen characters cut tomatoes so often in anime. Like, and I can't think of a single time where I have seen, like, the juice coming out of the tomato onto the cutting board. Even in, like, Shinkai stuff, where, like, it's like, oh, anime food looks so good. I've never seen that particular detail. So, like, there is such care put into how things look in this show that writing off the animation for, like, a few flaws here and there is fucking absurd to me. But anyway, the music, wild as shit. Like, this is some full orchestral scoring. It's like, this is another one of those shows where it's like a composer who doesn't normally work on anime. Like, I think it's like Junosuke something. I forgot what his last name is. But I think he's only done Ancient Magus Bride and Plunderer, which is weird. But, he is very much only known for this show in terms of anime. I don't know what else he's known for outside of anime, but goddamn, he is hitting it out of the park with this. There's just so much fucking power to his music, especially in how he uses this brass section, these wailing trumpets, these vibrating tubas and trombones and euphoniums. It is just so goddamn good. This show rules. It looks like there may be another season coming relatively soon. They announced I think it's called the Fiendbane arc at the end of this season. I don't know if they already announced the release date, but I am super excited for that. I wasn't sure how much I was going to like this second season, because the end of the first season, the climax of the first season kind of let me down. But man, this show is so fucking good. I am all on board now. If you haven't caught up on this series recently, you definitely should. It's fucking good. Alright, just finished all of Bungou Stray Dogs seasons 4 and 5. Both of those aired this year, or 2023, I believe. I have been slowly catching up on Bungou Stray Dogs since I heard that these seasons were a step above. And man, they were right. These were something else. Like, for the most part, like the seasons 1 through 3 of Bungou Stray Dogs, I had been very hit and miss for me. Like, the first season, I thought was pretty decent. I liked the fun edginess of it. season 2 and 3 were both bogged down by here's my what is apparently a hot take about this franchise is I do not give a shit about the Dazai flashbacks at all. I just don't. Like, I appreciate them for what they set up in the present day story, but as stories themselves, I found them incredibly boring and uninteresting. Especially the one in season 2, which is, was originally where I had I had originally dropped Bungou Stray Dogs during that, either during that flashback or right at the end of that flashback, because I just did not care for it at all. But this time I powered through to get back to the present day stuff. Man, it was worth it. Like the season 4 flashback was like the first big flashback arc of the series that I actually liked. Mostly because this series figured out that Rampo is the best character in the show. And every time he is on screen, it makes things 10 times better. So they put him in way more of the series this time. Thank you. Thank you for that. He is so incredibly fun and charismatic and cocky and just flamboyantly arrogant and fun. Love him. And the mysteries that he solves are actually like really fun, because it's like you get the feel with the I have mentioned in the past that I'm not super into mystery series, and so I don't have a ton of experience with them. But with the way that Rampo is written, you get it makes you feel like, oh, why didn't I think of that? Instead of like, well, there's no way I could have thought of that. Like it makes you think that you could have done it yourself. And sometimes I did do it myself. Sometimes I did like figure it out just before Rampo stated it. So I really enjoyed a lot of the mystery stuff there, and also all of the big character moments in these seasons. Like season 4 had Yosano's flashback about the basic her being forced to create essentially an immortal army, and just the trauma and PTSD that comes with that. That was a banger episode. I don't know if that or the final episode of season 5 are my favorites from this season. I'm leaning more towards the finale of season 5 just because Genichiro is so fucking good. Like recently, when I'm recording this, the R Anime Awards put out their like nominees for like their best of the year, whatever, and I'm pretty sure Genichiro was on the list. And I was like, well, it's a good thing I'm catching up on Bungou Stray Dogs right now, so I can figure out why this guy is why this guy got nominated. And man, that was a hell of a character right there. Just the way this supreme behind-the-scenes manipulator and in front of the scenes manipulator, just this all-encompassing badass mastermind leading everybody in 72 different directions at once. And also his power is basically Kira from JoJo. This like time manipulation thing. I know there are other time manipulation powers in existence, but for some reason it just it's smacked me of Kira influence for some reason. Maybe because Bungou Stray Dogs in general, the power system is very JoJo-like. Although most power systems now are JoJo-like, to be honest. But I don't know. It struck me as Kira, but much nobler in his cause, where it's like we got the ultimate conundrum of do you stop what Well, it's not really a conundrum because no one really finds out what he's trying to do until the very end when it's too late to stop him, or too late to stop before you defeat him. But I did it. This was a very fun and interesting reimagining of the classic, like, become a dictator to stop all wars concept. Like, it was a I'm having trouble putting it into words for some reason now, but just the way that it was presented in this, I will admit, at the end, it felt like it was trying to make it feel like a twist. Maybe that was his ultimate end goal, aside from just taking over the world. But, like, it seemed like that was the only logical place it could go for the way that this character was written. So when they, like, phrased it as, like, a twist at the end, I'm like, was that supposed to be a twist? Either way, the way that this noble, sort of noble way that he purports himself with as this soldier who has been completely, like, corrupted by the battlefield, like, is basically forced to live in his own world, essentially, where he has, like, all of his friends don't really understand him anymore, because it's a very good representation of war, I guess. When you come back from the war and you're just different, and you think different. And so stopping war at whatever cost sounds pretty noble. And, like, just the complete dissolution of the state. Yeah, as someone who's been listening to a lot of Cool Zone Media podcasts lately, I was kind of like, no, yeah, that sounds like it might work. And, like, him comparing it to the Warring States period of Japan kind of drove home the point of, like, for there to be war, there has to be an us and a them. But if it's just we, then there can't be war. So, wishful thinking on a state level, I guess. I think there will always be an us and a them. But personally, I think if we eliminated the state apparatus, I think it would be a lot harder to go to war in general if we just forced people, or if people were forced to just be communal. Not necessarily forced, but just, like, now we're getting on a tangent about anarchism, but I do like that they phrase it as the reason that he lost and the reason that his ideals lost is because he wasn't creating a stateless society. He was creating a one-state society. So if the state, in his own words, if the state is just the manifestation of the need to use violence, then that won't go away under a one-state world. It'll just be him with all the power to use violence. And I doubt that he would not have to use that. So I like that they framed it as, like, no, this stateless solution, it could work. It's just that that's not ultimately what he was trying to achieve. What he was trying to he was just going about it the wrong way. And so it didn't, like, completely discount his philosophical argument in the end. So that, like, I was very afraid that that's where it was going, but it ended up not doing that. So I really appreciate that from just this incredibly charismatic and engaging character to follow. The way that he builds the relationships with the people around him, his past with the detective agency president, man, it was so good. And his, like, his ultimate defeat at the end got me tearing up a bit, especially when they brought back Teriko at the very end, this one of the hunting dogs, to be the final executioner for him, and it was just like, oh, that hurts for some reason. Oh, also I love the hunt, all the new characters that were introduced in these seasons. I love Teriko. As soon as she was on screen, on screen, I was like, I want her to do unspeakable things to me. This show has a really good habit of drawing redheads with really fun personalities that I really like. We got more. Speaking of which, we got more Lucy this season, so that was fun. She's always a blast for this series. I forget what his name is. The port mafia guy, who is or the hunting dog who is infiltrating the port mafia, but ended up siding with the port mafia at the end. Really liked him and his character arc, how he related to Yosano and all of the characters involved in this. It was one thing where it was like one of my minor like plot contrivance kind of gripes with this is like, for the most part, like the reality writing thing, like the way that Rampo and everyone else sort of breaks past that, most of the time makes sense. Like when the one guy I just mentioned, the Port Mafia guy, like the reason that he is able to break free from the reality rewrite thing, where it's like all law enforcement will refuse to be swayed by any evidence that the detective agency is innocent. Like, they get around that by saying, like, oh, I'm not really a hunting dog anymore. I am more aligned with the Port Mafia. So I liked that reasoning for it. But then at one point they just go like, and 1/3 of cops have decided to side with the detective agency. I'm like, how? Is it just through sheer will? There were a few sheer will moments in this, but that one in particular just kind of stood out to me as being like, I don't know about that one. Also, I will say season 5 moved really fucking fast. I feel like those early episodes, like the first like 6-ish episodes, could have been expounded a little bit more, because it's just like rushing through plot points left and right. All of a sudden there's a fucking vampire army showing up, and like, it's all really cool stuff. I felt like it needed just a little bit more development, but you know what? It kept the pacing really fucking quick and kept me really engaged, I guess, so I really liked that. I also like that we're just getting these piecemeal world building elements. Like, we're finding out about this war that I'm pretty sure was mentioned in previous seasons, but now we get a little bit more of like what was actually going on in that war, the gifted war or whatever. We find out about these like the 10 calamities or whatever, and one of them was like a vampire plague, which was really cool. By the way, casting Kenjiro Suda as Bram Stoker, fucking phenomenal choice. I love Kenjiro Suda. He voices Overhaul in My Hero Academia, and he's one of my favorite voice actors right now. Just pitch perfect casting for him, for Bram. The relationship between Bram and, I forget what the little girl's name is. What is it, Aya, I think? I really thought that weird comedic / dramatic dynamic was really fucking fun. Although I will say her voice actress was a little iffy. Like, one of the few instances where I'm like, the voice acting could be a little stronger in some elements. Yeah, these 2 seasons were definitely worth catching up on Bungou Stray Dogs for. I will admit, I think Taku Iwasaki is starting to mellow out too much, to be honest. Like the composer, he's like one of my favorite soundtrack composers. Soul Eater, Gurren Lagann, JoJo Part 2, and of course Bungou Stray Dogs. And he's got this great way of just mashing genres together, like classical, rock, rap, and hip hop. Just and jazz sometimes. The way he just blends stuff together is really fun. And like his stuff was competent in these seasons, but it definitely didn't stand out in comparison to like other tracks. Like there is no like standout tracks in this particular soundtrack, which is something I always look forward to in Iwasaki soundtracks. There is no Libra Me from Hell. There is no Gotcha in the Name of Love. There is no fucking Il Mare and whatever that operatic track was in JoJo Part 2 where Caesar dies. So it's still competent, but I think he needs a little shot in the arm, a little bit of a inspiration. Maybe give him something to work on besides Bungou Stray Dogs. Speaking of people who have been stuck with Bungou Stray Dogs, Taku Iwasaki is still good as an incredible director. Fucking incredible shot composition. Although I will say, he really milks the two characters standing off in a wide shot moment. He uses that so much in this season, in these 2 seasons, and every single one of them looks really good. Like his use of color, his just framing, and just his balance between the dramatic and the comedic, that nice edginess that he brings to his productions. Just I wish he was making other things besides Bungou Stray Dogs, but now I'm finally happy I got to see more of him. The action scenes in this were incredible. The character designs were just so damn good. I really like the square-shaped iris of the character designs. Like it's like a rounded square, or I guess more of a rounded diamond technically, but just really damn cool designs. Yeah, I could go on forever about all the different cool characters in this, like Fyodor's whole thing with Dazai in this, just and how menacing he is as a character, like Sigma's like journey toward very accelerated journey towards self-actualization. I will say Atsushi kind of got the short end of the stick in this one, but that's only because he was surrounded by so many other cool characters, and also Akutagawa. Like I think Akutagawa has significant real estate in the 4th OP, and then he doesn't show up at all in season 4. So that was wild. And then he had some cool moments here, but otherwise kind of underutilized. Again, just because there are so many other characters taking up the spotlight. So I don't think I would necessarily... I guess I just wanted more content from this season, from these seasons, I guess. Like, it did feel a little rushed in spots, but otherwise, damn good time all around. I'm very happy I decided to jump back into Bungou Stray Dogs to experience this. Alright, I just got back from seeing Suzume in theaters. This is the new Makoto Shinkai epic. Now, full disclosure, if you haven't been following me for a while, I haven't had the most, high opinion of Shinkai for the past, 4 years or so. I liked 5 centimeters per second when I saw it, a decade ago, and I thought Voices of a Distant Star was okay, but I watched Your Name, 4 years ago, and I absolutely hated it, which might be, my most, controversial, hot take. So I had fairly low expectations going in to this one. But you know what? I think my Shinkai hater arc might be over because this movie slaps something fierce. This is a lot. This movie is a lot, both in terms of the amount of ideas that it crams in and just the amount of genre it crams in. This is basically a summer blockbuster of sorts. It's this big action-adventure, road trip, romance, family trauma, drama, supernatural, giganto thing that is all basically a metaphor for coming to terms with the Tohoku earthquake. Which might sound familiar if you've seen Your Name, because that movie was also that. But I think there's a very notable distinction to make there. Whereas Your Name was basically like how people come together in response to disaster, if I'm remembering Your Name correctly, and like how disaster affects people directly in the moment. Suzume is much more about the after effects of disaster, how much what this disaster does to you in the future, the memories it leaves you with, the trauma that it leaves you with. And this was also something that I talked about last year with The House of the Lost on the Cape, which I thought did not do that very well because it didn't look very good and all the characters were super boring. But I would say Suzume does that significantly better. This was just, if you ever seen that clip from, it's like from an Adult Swim sketch or something, it's that guy who says, "I know writers who use subtext and they're all cowards." That's this movie. This is just like no subtext at all. This is no longer a metaphor. This is just, we are talking directly about 311 and the scars that it has left on the Japanese populace. And it is just so incredibly powerful for that. And I am, like, it's just, there was some stuff in the third act of this film that just had me, like, almost bawling. I was definitely tearing up near the end of this film with just how very simple but very raw some of the imagery and some of the ideas that it presents are. And I think the ideas that it comes up with on how we address that trauma, how we get over, basically, like, some of these characters have just had their lives completely reset because of this. And the way that it sort of gets over it through this very thinly veiled supernatural metaphor, I think is a very healthy and very emotionally cathartic way to process that trauma. I don't want to give away too much. I kind of already gave away a lot, but I think in order to properly understand this movie, I think you kind of need to go in knowing, like, this is Makoto Shinkai doing the Makoto Shinkai thing again. Obviously, you probably already expected that. It's a supernatural disaster movie that has romance subtext to it. It's a Shinkai film. And normally I would hate him for that. That's what I usually hate Shinkai for. It's what I hate Your Name for, because I didn't think it did it very well. But this one, I think it did it a lot stronger. Despite the fact that I don't think the characters are significantly more interesting than they were in Your Name. I would say they're probably around the same level, but what I like about this movie as opposed to Your Name, I think I liked the chemistry between the two leads a lot more than in Your Name. I just did not buy the romance at all in Your Name. I just didn't. And despite how quickly Suzume and this mysterious very sexy guy, Sota, suddenly just get thrown together in this supernatural confuckery. Despite that, I think that the dialogue that they share, the way that they sort of lean on each other as the movie goes on, the trials that they go through, the trauma that they suffer together, I can definitely see how a romance blossoms out of that. And I very much bought that, despite the fact that, like, in the first act, I really didn't think either of these characters were particularly interesting, but it really was that chemistry that they shared, that dialogue, that made them so compelling, and what actually made me want the happy ending for this film of sorts. Again, not giving away what happens in the third act of this film, but it is wild. Speaking of wild, I think this is another thing I really appreciated about this film is a lot of it is just kind of silly, but it just goes like all in on it without even like a wink or a nod to the camera whatsoever. Like, if you've seen the trailer, it's in the trailer. A hot guy gets turned into a chair by a talking cat. There's a lot more details behind that, but they just sort of run with that. There's no like, oh geez, isn't this weird, like every 10 minutes or so. They just kind of, like, there's something so sincerely earnest about it that I very much appreciated. And that really helped with the immersion, I guess, with how really silly some of these concepts were. And I really appreciated that. Not a whole lot else to talk about in terms of like plot or theming or anything. The side cast was kind of nice. It really fleshed out a lot of the, like, this is how we've dealt with the disaster. And also just like, it kind of expounds out, especially in like the first half of the film, it really expounds out to like just memories on the whole, and what role memories serve in our lives, how we relate to the past, how like some elements of the past are kind of lost to us. And that really helped like make these side characters kind of stand out and just be very enjoyable for like the brief time that they are on screen. So yeah, story elements pretty solid, and visual elements pretty solid, which you probably would expect, since Shinkai has developed this reputation for being like so hyper detailed and extremely beautiful with his animation. Truth be told, that's another problem that I personally have with Shinkai. I think his art is very detailed and very like colorful and very like well composed, but there's something that on the whole Shinkai never leaves a lot of impact with me. And I think I've figured out what it is with this film, seeing this film finally, is that nothing ever stops moving. Like, almost until like the very like third act, when it really like slows down for the big emotional climax. Nothing ever just stops moving like you're used to in anime. Limited animation is out the window on this one. This is a very fluid, very animated movie. And if you're into that, cool. This is going to be your jam. But I do think it takes away from the impact that anime is known for. Those really impactful still frames that you see in like some other works. And I was kind of hoping for some of that there, but that's not really Shinkai's style at this point. And I don't like hate it. I don't think like this is like an awful thing. It's just something I would have wished for from the movie. But again, in the end, it's a very pretty film. There's nothing like ugly about this except maybe the CG. There's a lot of very obvious CG in this film. It never like completely took me out of the moment, but there were like so many like very obvious like set builds. Every time someone's in a car, like 90% of the shot is CG, and it's super obvious. And it's not the worst thing ever, but it is noticeable. But I very much need you to understand that I am the hot take guy when it comes to how Makoto Shinkai films look. That is just I want to lay it on real thick that is my personal take on it. Because I know a lot of people will not agree with me. So, just going to throw that out there. What I can say wholeheartedly, I very much enjoyed with like no qualms whatsoever, is the soundtrack. This soundtrack goes so fucking hard, really carries a lot of the moments that might have otherwise just been okay. And apparently the composer was, what's his name? Kazuma Jinochi, I think was his name, who is apparently one of the composers for Halo 4, which is weird. But yeah, this soundtrack fucking slaps. There's just, like, most of it is just gigantic orchestral numbers that are just loud and bombastic and incredibly moving. And I love that shit. But there was also like this one kind of jazzy track early on in the film during like one of the first chase sequences that just really got the energy going and really like kicked this film into high gear. And that's another thing about this film is it just goes. There's like up until like the emotional resolution and like maybe like the twist right before the third act. There's not much downtime in this film. It is just going. The pacing in this film is incredible. That's why I think of it as like a summer blockbuster. It is just non-stop, always on, and I really appreciate that. On top of all the ideas that it throws in about memory and loss and trauma, on top of all the genre ideas that it puts together, this was a really damn solid film. Bravo, Shinkai. I'm back on board. I'm feeling like a strong 7, probably a light 8 on this one, maybe even a decent 8. Somewhere around there. I'm thinking a light 8 on this one. Characters could have been a little bit more interesting, but they were incredibly serviceable and very engaging on a chemistry level. So yeah, go see this film. I don't know if it's going to make as much money as Your Name will, but one can hope. Alright, I just got back from seeing Blue Giant in theaters. This is the new anime film from Yuzuru Tachikawa, who is the director of Mob Psycho 100. And it's based on a manga series that's been around for a little bit, a few years now. I almost picked this manga up several times at the bookstore that I normally go to. It was just sitting there. But in general, I have a rule against reading music manga because manga is not the medium through which I want to experience a story about music. I would very much prefer a audio visual medium when it comes to music, even more so with Blue Giant because, as you can see, I am a sax player myself, and the main character of this film is a sax player, although I play alto and he plays tenor. But anyway, yeah, I was very interested in what I was gonna get out of this movie, especially because even though I am a sax player, I'm not really a jazz guy. Like, I don't dislike jazz, but I was always much more of a classical musician myself. But, oh boy, does this film sell you on jazz. It goes all in on trying to make jazz look like the greatest fucking thing ever. And on the whole, I think it succeeds in that regard. It just goes balls out with all of these performances. Let's just jump into the performances. These performances are so fucking cool, with one exception visually that we'll get to in a little bit. But like the audio texture to it, actually, the first performance actually threw me off a little bit. Like when he first plays for when Dai, the saxophone player, plays for Sawabe, the pianist, for the first time. It actually threw me off because he just goes full growl with the tone that he goes for. Personally, I think growl should be more of an accent than the main play style. See, this is where we're going to get into the specifics on like my personal preferences for jazz and just tone and stuff. But aside from that, the like present, like that was just like one instant, like that was like a one-off though. Like the growl is not totally present for the rest of it. I think now that I'm thinking back on it, it's just like he's just trying to be absolutely in your face as much as possible in that particular moment. But the performances overall are just so incredibly like big and bombastic and in your face, and the audio end of it is definitely a huge part of it. I believe I forgot who the saxophone player was in the credits, but the music overall and the piano parts were done by, I think it was Hiromi Uehara, who's apparently like a big jazz pianist in Japan. Oh boy, these piano performances were something else, especially like the last real big piano thing. Like this, there's a point where the big character growth moment for the pianist in this film, it's insane. He's doing shit that I've never heard people do with a piano before. So apparently I need to listen to more jazz pianists because goddamn, that was insane. But aside from that, the visual presentation of these performances is so goddamn impressive. The color design is so fucking good. The visual representations, like the abstract metaphors of it all, like a lot of them have this very elemental theme to it. Like there's one that I would describe as kind of like a cozy campfire, almost candle kind of feel. One of them has like this electric energy to it, and where it's like supercharging the audience. One has this like ice thawing metaphor in it. Like these are all like the visual abstract representations of it. And like there's one that's just feels like a roaring blue hot fire. That kind of plays into the title a little bit, but well, I'll leave that for you when you eventually go see this. By the way, if you do end up seeing this in theater, as a side note, you will be forced to view a trailer for the new Miyazaki film. So, just a heads up if you wanted to keep yourself like image free before you saw that. So I have to live with that trailer now. But anyway, the visuals were so goddamn good. Like the last performance, there is a moment where like he goes, like this is the director of Mob Psycho 100, and that part of him comes out in this in the last like big performance of this movie. It is just awe-inspiring. And like even aside from that, like there's almost like a little bit of Yuasa elements to this too, and just how the colors flow and how these shapes and forms mesh with each other. This movie was a lot more abstract than I was expecting, and I love it for that. But there is a downside to this, because there is a trade-off, because the abstractness and the like crispness of it all, the abstract color work and the crispness of the like instruments and the facial expressions are one thing, and then sometimes we get really bad CG models. Yeah, there was definitely a trade-off, and it is Now, it doesn't always look bad, but most of the time the CG models don't look good. Like, there was one part in particular where, like, you could see, I think it was like an alto sax player just, like, not really doing anything sensical in the background. It just looked really bad. Because especially, like, a lot of the times the lighting for those moments isn't particularly good either. Not that there's a lot... Well, lighting can do a lot when it comes to CG models, but it can only do so much. One of these days, everyone in Japan, everyone in the anime industry is going to learn how to do what Studio Orange does and actually, keep the frame rate the same as the rest of the shot. I don't know. That might help. Just saying. Because these CG models are such a absolutely garish eyesore on what is otherwise a visually stunning film. But even outside the performance scenes, there's some pretty I do like the general feel of this film visually. Like, the character designs are real interesting. Like, Dai has this, like, very old-fashioned kind of character design almost. He reminds me a little bit of, like, the main character from Hajime no Ippo. It's got kind of that, like, almost, like, shonen gruffness to it. Meanwhile, the piano player, Soabe, he floats somewhere between, like, Rintaro from Steins Gate and the main character from Parasite. He's got this very, like, suave character design. And then the drummer is a little bit more in the, like... He's almost like Tompa from Hunter x Hunter, but not nearly as ugly. I like the diversity of character designs in this. Just generally well shot, well composed. It's just visually very solid, except for those damn CG models. But aside from the visuals, it's those visuals are supporting a really solid story underneath all of this too. It's very much a very passion-driven film, a very emotion-driven film. Like, these guys really just want to play jazz. And sometimes it goes a little bit overboard with that. Whereas, like, there are some moments where it's like, well, no, you kind of actually have to put, like, some mental thought behind this, but Dai is just like, no, I'm just going to play. I'm just going to play, I'm going to play, I'm going to play, I'm going to play. Which, you know what? I've met people like that. So, fair enough. Fair enough. I was in the School of Music at my college for 3 years, so I have met those people. They are something. Yeah, this was, but that part of it is also very endearing in a way, because, like, it's very shonen-y, but not in an immature way, because there are a lot of, it never goes, like, it never dips too far into, like, power of friendship territory, or, willpower territory, because, like, there's a moment, again, part of the Soabe's character arc where, like, one of the characters just gets super real with him and is like, I don't have time for your bullshit. I'm just gonna like keep going. And it was a very interesting moment. Like, Dai is a super static character in this, which is fine for what he is. Like, he's just the insane talent that just throws himself at the music nonstop. Probably the most riding the line of suspension of disbelief part of this film, though, is the drummer getting as good as he does in what I think it's like 18 months. This is how long this spans. Now, not to disparage drummers, but if I was going to pick one instrument where you could get fairly competent in 18 months, probably drums. But even still, some of the stuff he does in, like, the final performance of this movie is pretty intense. So that was a little bit riding the line of suspension of disbelief, but I was willing to roll with it just because, like, the intense passion behind all these characters was really enrapturing. You really get swept up in the passion of these guys. And also, they just have really good chemistry together. These are just some college-age boys hanging out, playing music, and getting totally engulfed in the music that they're playing. Is good times. Yeah, I kind of felt like I was going to have more to say about the story, but it kind of really is all about, like, the passionate side of it. Really, like, there are some cool, but there are some very, like, interesting, like, down to earth moments, being like, hey, you have to do this, or hey, you kind of suck. I don't have time for this. And so it's not like the answers to things are, like, formless. Just be passionate. Like, there are more, like, interesting critiques to it. But yeah, really enjoyed this film. Oh, I forgot to mention about the visuals. Like, there was a shot, I think it was in the final performance, where it was like very, like, I don't know why I didn't notice it until then, but, like, they finally put, like, the Selmer logo for the saxophone front and center, and then I saw, like, you saw down on the towards down a little bit further, it was a Super Action 80. I'm like, oh, fucking of course. I have a Selmer Paris personally, since I'm more classical folk. I was more classical focused, but a Super Action would definitely be better for jazz. I'm surprised it wasn't a Yamaha, though, because the drums were Yamaha, and I'm surprised that they didn't do, like, a Yamaha for the saxophone, because that's the other big, like, for saxophones there's Selmer, there's Yamaha, and then there's everything else, so that doesn't matter. So I was surprised that Yamaha was not picked as the jazz sax. But again, I don't know as much about jazz, like the specifics of jazz, as I probably should. But yeah, overall, really damn solid film. There was some really strong emotional moments in, like, the last act of this film too. I don't want to dive into any spoilers or anything, but there's some really heart-rending stuff in it. It can be a little corny. It can be a little corny at times. It can be a little straining suspension of disbelief sometimes. But aside from those terrible CG stuff, the visuals pull you along so well, and the passion of these characters pull you along so well, that this is definitely a film worth seeing if you get the chance. I'm feeling probably like a decent to strong 8 on this one. This was a really damn good film. Definitely going to pick this one up on Blu-ray when it comes out.
All right, that is my 11 through 20 spots for the best of 2023. Don't forget to tune in next week to see my top 10. In the meantime, let's talk about some miscellaneous things. First, let's talk about my best episodes of 2023. These are just like 5 episodes that I thought stood head and shoulders above everything else, that just deeply affected me on an emotional, thematic, narrative level, so on and so forth. These aren't ordered in any way. I just wanted to highlight them specifically. So we have Oshinoko, episode 6. That is Akane's big episode. Just the absolute dread and anxiety running throughout that episode was just so incredibly potent and powerful, and it was easily the most visually stunning episode of the entire series, if I recall. Really great use of darkness, as well as contrasting it against lighting. It's good shit. Then there's Vinland Saga Season 2, Episode 9. That is Thorfinn's dream sequence, where he finally comes to the revelation about what he should be doing with his life moving forward. Just that, probably the most pivotal moment in all of Vinland Saga. That moment where the coin flips from Thorfinn being all about revenge and such to now he is going to be the pacifist hero of sorts. Very, very powerful episode. Haunting visuals. And Ashlad's voice actor, whose name I forgot, gave an incredibly powerful performance there. Next is Bungou Stray Dogs Season 5, Episode 11. That's the finale of Season 5. Just the final revelation of Genichiro's plot and why he was doing everything. This sort of totalitarian to save the world kind of idea. And just a really powerful moment for this character. Made him one of my favorite antagonists of the year. He's good shit. Next we have Pluto, episode 7. That is the penultimate episode. That is where, I forgot what his name is, the photon energy guy fights Pluto. There was a bunch of other stuff that happened in there, but that, just the torrent of powerful emotions coming out of this series were, they culminated so perfectly in a lot of the moments in episode 7. Just non-stop thrilling front to back. And finally, Pokemon Paldean Winds episode 1. Of course, I was going to throw a fucking Pokemon episode in here. This was just such a perfect encapsulation of what Pokemon is able to do. Just this very seemingly eclectic mishmash of story elements all put together in a very tight 11 minutes that still had a very, very strong emotional core to it. It highlighted the wonder and awe that comes with being in the world of Pokemon. Really liked Ohara's character struggle in this episode. Of course, the visuals were just incredibly stunning. It is Wit Studios after all, so it was some good stuff. And those are my top 5 episodes in no particular order from 2023. And moving on from that, we have my favorite OPs and EDs from the year. Just 10 of my favorite songs from the year, no particular order. These are the songs that are on here either because they just have a really fucking great sound to them, or I thought they were incredibly well representative of the tone of the series, like the emotional core of the series. Some, like, a lot of them really they're just a fucking bop. I'm not really gonna go into specifics on any of these because it's just kind of a feel kind of thing, if you get me. But I will also point out that I am referencing the full versions of these songs as well. I'm not talking about like the OP as an audio-visual thing. I am talking about the song. So these are my top 10 anime songs of 2023. I would highly recommend checking them out. They are some good songs. All right, that's it for this video. Check back next week for my top 10 anime of 2023.